All right, here is the last section of the notes for this chapter. We are still going to be using synthetic division to help us find roots or solutions. But last week when we were doing this, I told you that like maybe 2 was a solution or that x plus 3 was a factor. Okay, so now how do you do that? How do you get started if you're not given any information about your zeros or your factors? Okay, so that's what I'm going to show you how to do today. Okay, so first I'm going to show you how to come up with possibilities that could be your solutions, and that's called the rational zero theorem. Okay, we're going to be looking for P's and Q's. All right, P's are the factors of any factors of the constant term. Q is the factor of the leading coefficient. Okay, so for A, 1, okay, 1 is your leading coefficient, -6 is your constant. Okay, so your constant, your P's are going to come from -6, your Q's are going to come from 1, and then we divide them, P over Q. Okay, so P, what are factors of -6? Well, anything that would multiply to give you -6. So it could be a 1 and a 6, or it can be a 2 and a 3. Okay, so those are all possible factors of 6. Okay, since Q is 1, the only thing that multiplies to give you 1 is a positive 1, is 1 times 1 or -1 times -1. Okay, so now that we have our list of P's and Q's, we're going to divide them. All right, so that's going to look like this. So P divided by Q. So we're going to take our first P plus and minus 1, divide it by our Q plus and minus 1. Well, that just gives us plus or minus 1. Okay, so then I'm going to do my next P, which is 2, and divide it by my Q, which is 1. Okay, then I'm going to do the same thing for 3, same thing for 6. All right, so I end up with plus and minus 3 and plus and minus 6. Okay, so here's my list. Here's all of my P's divided by my Q's. 1, plus and minus 1, 2, 3, 6. Okay, so when I go to solve this to find all the solutions, these numbers, the plus and minus 1, plus and minus 2, 3, 6, I'm choosing from those, and I'm going to try to see which one works. Okay, so I'll show you how to do that in a minute. All right, first let's go to B and let's talk about the P's and Q's from B. Okay, well, my P's are going to come from the constant term, which is 8. My Q is going to come from the leading coefficient, which is 2. Okay, so my P's are going to be plus and minus 1, plus and minus 2, plus and minus 4, plus and minus 8. Okay, so you got 1 times 8 or 2 times 4 to make that 8. Your Q, to make a 2, is going to be plus and minus 1, plus and minus 2, 1 times 2. Okay, so now we got to do our P's divided by our Q's. Okay, so I'm going to take my first P, which is plus and minus 1, and I'm going to divide it by the first Q, which is plus and minus 1. Okay, so that's going to be a plus and minus 1. Okay, now I'm going to take the next P and divide it by 1. Okay, so my next P, which is 2, plus and minus 2, and divide it by plus and minus 1, and we get 2. Okay, I think you're catching on to see what the pattern is. So then we would do 4 divided by 1, so that would give us plus and minus 4, and then we would go 8 divided by 1, plus and minus 8. Okay, now you also have a Q that's a 2. Okay, so you have a Q that's a 2, so we got to divide everything by 2. Okay, so we're going to do that. So we're going to take our p's and we're going to divide it by the 2 from our q's. So p divided by q, I'm going to have plus and minus 1 divided by a 2, so that's going to be a 1/2, plus and minus 1/2. Okay, then I'm going to take the 2 and divide it by 2. Okay, now when you do this one, this reduces to a 1. Okay, but we already had a 1 listed over here, so we don't need that one. Okay, so you can get rid of that one. All right, now if I do 4 divided by 2, well, the same thing happens. 4 divided by 2 is 2, and we already have a 2 right here, so that one's already taken care of. We don't need that one. And then lastly, with the 8 divided by 2, well, that's going to be 4. And again, we already have a 4, so we don't need that one. Okay, so I know I got like a lot written here. So what is this that we've got? Okay, so here's your final version. Your p's divided by your q's. We've got 1, 2, 4, and 8. So plus and minus 1, 2, 4, 8. And then we found a 1/2. Okay, so plus and minus of all of those. Okay, so what those are is those are your possibilities. So those are the numbers where we could find where we will find rational solutions. Okay, so let's try this out. So for 41, find all real zeros of the function. Okay, well, this equation here is the same one back in this previous example with number 40. Okay, so these values of my p's divided by my q's, these are the ones that we're going to choose from. Okay, all right, so it's kind of just a shot in the dark. So let's pick something. Let's see if it works. Okay, so let's just start with a 1. So if I put 1 in my box, I'm going to write down my coefficients. Okay, I'm going to bring 1 down, and I'm going to multiply. I'm going to add. I'm going to multiply. I'm going to add. I'm going to multiply, and I'm going to add. Okay, so when I tried 1, you can see what happens. We get a remainder. Okay, well, since we have a remainder, that means it's not a solution. It doesn't divide evenly. Okay, so 1 was not one of the solutions I'm looking for. All right, so we're going to try another one. So let's just try -1 and see what happens. I just picked 1 to start with and then -1. It does not matter. You can pick any of those numbers listed. So 1, okay, so that goes 0. This goes 0. -3 comes down. I multiply, and I get +3. Okay, so this one doesn't work either. Does not work. Okay, so we got to choose another number. Okay, so I'm going to try +2 next, and we'll see what happens. Again, you don't have to go in order. That's just how I just happened to pick to do it today. Okay, so 1 comes down. We're going to multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add. Okay, now I like this one. 2 worked. Okay, so we got that remainder 0, so that means I found one of the zeros. Or I found one of the solutions. Okay, so now remember, if we go back and look at this equation. So we started with a cubic, x cubed. Okay, this guy was a cubic. So we found one of the solutions that we've divided. That means these are now coefficients for a quadratic. So this says x squared plus 3x plus 3 equals 0. Okay, now I'm finding all real zeros. So I need to solve this. So if we have a quadratic, to solve, usually first thing we do is we try product sum table. Okay, except you can see on this one, it is not going to work. Product sum table is not going to work. So I need to do something else. I'm going to use quadratic formula. Okay, so quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so I'm going to have opposite of b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So negative 3 plus and minus square root 9 minus 12 over 2. So this becomes negative 3 plus or minus square root of negative 3 all over 2. Well, this is an imaginary because we're square root of a negative. So I got I root 3 over 2. Okay, so there's our last two solutions. All right, so our zeros. What are our zeros? Okay, our zeros are 2. Okay, that's the one we found from our P's and Q's list. And then our other two zeros are negative 3 plus or minus I root 3 over 2. Okay, these are all of your zeros, all of them. However, if you go back here, if you'll notice the directions, this says find all real zeros. Okay, real zeros. Well, these are imaginary. Okay, so if we only want all real zeros, then actually the only one we would list would be this one right here. Okay, but if it was all zeros, then you would include your two imaginary solutions also. Okay, all right, let's look at B. First thing we're going to need to do is find our P's and our Q's. So we're going to start making that list. Okay, so our P's are going to come from 14, and our Q's are going to come from 1. Okay, so what numbers multiply to give you 14? What are factors? I've got 1, 2, 7, and 14. My Q's are just plus and minus 1. Okay, so if I take my P's divided by my Q's, so if I go P divided by my Q, P divided by Q, well, 1 divided by 1 is just 1. And then I'm going to do 2 divided by 1, that's 2. 7 divided by 1 is 7. 14 divided by 1 is 14. Okay, so these are my possibilities. Those are the ones that I'm going to try. Okay, so for this one, we're going to pick one of our P divided by Q's. I'm going to pick 7. So let's do our coefficients. Okay, so 1 comes down. I'm going to multiply, add, multiply again, add, and look what happens. First time. Okay, so I chose right the first time. Now, what this, again, we started with a cubic, okay? This is x cubed. So we found one of the solutions, we divided it down. That means this is a quadratic. So this is x squared minus 1x minus 2. Okay, so we are still solving. We're finding all the solutions. Now, this one is kind of nice to us. If I do product sum table, this one will factor. Okay, so this is going to be x minus 2 and x plus 1 equals 0. All right, so what are our zeros? Well, the 7, okay, that I found with my synthetic division. And then since this is factored, put those equal to 0 and solve. So x minus 2 equals 0, move it over. That's going to become a positive 2. Same thing here, x plus 1 equals 0. Move that 1 over, that becomes a negative 1. Okay, so here are all 3 of my zeros. And it does satisfy what we're told to do. We're told to find all real zeros, and all 3 of these solutions are real. Okay, I am out of time for this recording. There will be a second part, though, to come back and finish these, and I want to show you a little trick, a little tool that we have at our disposal to make